our relationship with the natural world is out of balance. We are burning the library of life.
1 million species could go extinct in the next decades if we do not act. But this isn't just about species.
The ecosystems we rely on for our water, our air, and our food are also at risk of collapse.
Our survival depends on nature's survival. And scientists say we must act boldly and urgently.
That is why the United Arab Emirates,
Nigeria,
The United Kingdom,
Costa Rica,
France has joined forces with many countries across the world to form the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People.
Together, we're championing a global deal to safeguard our planet and ourselves. We are committed to conserving at least 30% of the planet's land and ocean by 2030.
this ambitious but achievable global goal can help us address the most important interdependence crisis: biodiversity collapse, the climate crisis, and the emergence of pandemics.
And this goal will also strengthen our economies and livelihoods through creating jobs.
It is time to take bold action to face this planetary emergency.
To heed the wisdom of our indigenous peoples and local communities as protectors of the most biodiverse sites in the world.
De proteger os nossos sistemas de suporte de vida e de nos tornarmos em ancestrais responsáveis para as futuras gerações.
But we cannot achieve this alone.
We call on all nations to join us in the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People, to commit to protecting at least 30% of our land and ocean by 2030.
And to advocate for this goal before the world meets to agree on the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework under the Convention of Biological Diversity.
Let's heal our relationship with the Earth.
Let's act now.
Hello everyone, I'm Mary Robinson. Welcome to the high-level ministerial event of the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People in the margins of the One Planet Summit. It's my great pleasure to be with all of you today. I'm going to be guiding you through today's historic event, introducing our speakers, an interactive roundtable, and a series of videos and pre-recorded messages. We'll be hearing from governments, indigenous peoples, scientists, and UN officials. 2020 was a tough year, but one very important lesson that can be drawn from it is that we have to respond and work collectively to meet common global challenges. In this spirit of collective action, the High Ambition Coalition of Nature and People was formed to unite countries around the ambitious and science-based goal of protecting at least 30% of the world's land and ocean by 2030. As the UN Special Envoy for Climate Change, I saw firsthand the critical role that a group of high ambition nations played in leading the world to adopt the Paris Agreement. That's why I'm so excited to see the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People come together to provide the leadership needed to help address the growing crisis facing biodiversity and the natural world. The coalition was officially launched a few hours ago by the President of Costa Rica, along with other leaders during the One Planet Summit. The launch of the coalition and this high-level event mark the beginning of a decisive year for nature and climate change, and highlight the need for collective action on both the biodiversity and climate change crises. I now have the pleasure to introduce Dr. Enric Sala, who is an explorer in residence at the National Geographic Society, a marine scientist, the executive director of Pristine Seas, and the author of The Nature of Nature, Why We Need the Wild. Dr. Sala, you have the floor. Following Dr. Sala's remarks, we will watch a short video showcasing the critical role that Indigenous people and local communities play in conserving biodiversity, which helps underscore the simple fact that they must be central partners in the development and implementation of the 30 by 30 target. But first, Dr. Sala, you now have the floor.
Thank you everyone for joining today. 2020 was supposed to be the super year for nature. Instead, it was the year of COVID-19. The irony here is that the pandemic was caused by the trade of wild animals and the destruction of their natural habitats. We have lost our balance with nature. Only a quarter of the inhabitable Earth is intact. The mass of our built environment, our cities, roads, and ports, has recently surpassed the mass of all living organisms on our planet. 96% of the mass of mammals are us and our domesticated livestock. Only 4% is everything else, from elephants to tigers to panda bears. This is bad news in itself, but also because everything we need to survive, the food we eat, the clean water we drink, the oxygen we breathe, depends on the work of other species and the ecosystems they create. And to capture the current excess of greenhouse gases, we need more biodiversity, more intact ecosystems. Our research is clear. If we are to prevent the extinction of 1 million species and the collapse of our life support system, if we are to achieve the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement, we need to safeguard half of the planet in its natural state. So protecting 30% of our planet by 2030 is a non-negotiable, no-brainer minimum step towards our own salvation. When we protect lands and ocean, nature bounces back, bringing with her all the environmental services our life depends on. For example, in no-fishing areas, the biomass of fish increases on average 600%. But some will say that we cannot afford to protect more. But planetary sustainability is like a wedding cake, in which the natural world underpins human society, which in turn supports the global economy. Put simply, prosperous societies and economies are impossible without a healthy natural world. And while governments subsidize industries that are destroying nature to the tune of $700 billion per year, the cost of protecting 30% of the planet would be less than what the world spends today on video games. But there is more. Protecting 30% would produce far greater economic output than business as usual. And the economic benefits far outweigh the costs. In the US, for example, every dollar that the government invests in our national parks generates $10 in economic output. That's 1,000 per 100 return. Therefore, 30 by 30 is the key to a world with lower risk of pandemics, a world with a healthier economy, a world where the lands and the rights of indigenous peoples are secured, a world with a more stable climate, a world that can support humanity as we know it. The science and the economics are clear. All we need is the political will to act. That's why this group of 50 champions is so important, and why it's so critical that the rest of our nation's leaders join them. Thank you very much.
The protected and conserved areas work. It's really about loving places that are amazing.
Indigenous people in Canada have been leading conservation efforts for decades. This includes the establishment of Indigenous Protected and Conserved Areas, or IPCAs, to protect lands and waters we all depend upon. IPCAs are places that Indigenous nations identify for conservation, often through community-driven processes. Indigenous communities determine the goal for IPCAs and manage lands.
I have a vested interest. I have two little grandsons that are 4 and 2 years old. I want them to be able to enjoy the benefits of what the natural wilderness is able to provide you.
Sometimes you don't understand that until you're on the land and you're traveling on the water. You're participating in a setting where you're connecting. For our communities, it's a vital part of who we are.
IPCAs are often designated through Indigenous law and then through partnership agreements with Crown governments. IPCAs have already been established in places like Tusu Denelin Tuyata, Edeji, and Tada Denene.
Signing an establishment agreement is one of the most progressive, modern type of agreement where we will co-create, govern, manage, and operate Saidinene together equally.
Dozens more IPCAs have been proposed. Taken together, IPCA proposals could conserve over 500,000 square kilometers of the boreal forest region. Indigenous-led conservation offers the best way to reach Canada's goal of protecting 25% of lands by 2025, part of the global effort to address huge losses of animals and plants.
I'd be really humbled and pleased to be a part of that as a Canadian, but also, as an Indigenous person, to be able to have that opportunity to protect our land.
IPCAs honor the relationship between people and the land. They ensure lands and cultures will thrive into the future.
Maybe if other Canadians could look at our land and see what we see, maybe, just maybe, they would want to protect it too.
Te atua mana o te rangi e hanga au mo hamaruru atu ki a koe. O oe, e vai mai te ora, pourat mahana mo here tātou. O ira, ka wamai koe te haumaru ki te anga nei o tātou. Their Excellencies, Ministers, distinguished speakers, community leaders, family and friends around the world. From Rapa Nui, I would like to send you my best wishes for this special and important year. My name is Ludovic Bungstuki, Executive Director of the community organization Te Mau Te Waikawa, who work in Rapa Nui Marine Conservation. Our main achievement has been to create the multiple-use marine protected area, the biggest of South America. In this way, together with the states, with the government, we have advanced in recognition of our ancestral rights and respect of our cosmovision linking to the environment, from the air, from the land, from the ocean. Te moana nui akiwa. We have formally decided to support and endorse the Marine 30% target. We want to invite all the nations who have not yet joined to supporting, conserving and protecting at least 30%. Kapai mai, come on. We need more humility as human. We need to get back to the ocean, respect and reciprocity to find the balance. This balance is the guarantee of the future of the next generation and the future beginning now. One ocean, one people, a future for all.
It is now my honour to hand the moderation for the interactive panel to the Minister of Environment and Energy of Costa Rica, Andrea Meza, and Minister for Pacific and the Environment of the United Kingdom, Lord Zach Goldsmith. Ministers, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mary, for giving me the floor and for your work supporting the Hack for Nature and People. Excellencies, colleagues, dear friends, good morning and good afternoon. I am delighted to co-chair this interactive session of the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People event with the Minister for Environment, Lord Jan.11th, to share and exchange views over the next 30 minutes. I hope technology now allows us to do so. I wish to start by thanking you for joining this event. It has been a long journey for this day to come. The High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People have been working tirelessly for over a year now to get more support to the 30 by 30 target as well as to the coalition. We have been eager to launch the coalition. Nonetheless, the last year had different plans for all of us. I will bet that you will be with me in this comment. We are living in extraordinary times. We're still in the turmoil of the tragedy and disruption of COVID-19. But here we are working and very committed with this target. Having the launch of the Hack for Nature and People at the very beginning of 2021 is a signal that we are ready to double our efforts and pool all of our energy and commitment for this decisive year to be the year in which we are not only listening to scientists, but also taking the bold decisions needed to solve the climate crisis and to reverse the severe trend of biodiversity loss. We have been hearing head of states with very good news and commitments, but we still need to work very hard, not only to survive, but to thrive together and take actions towards the transformative change so needed in our societies. In the case of my country, Costa Rica, we are very committed with the 30 by 30 goal, and we are recognizing the importance of not only to meet the 30 by 30 goal, but to ensure the financial sustainability of this area. And for this reason, I am proud to announce that with the support of Forever Costa Rica Association, we are launching the Forever Blue Fund, which will ensure the financial sustainability and ensure the long-term conservation of marine biodiversity. Before handing the floor to my co-chair, I wish to share with you that the coalition now has over the 50 members. We are so excited about this. And today we will have the honor to hear from several inspiring ministers and champions of the Hack for Nature and People. It has been an honor to work with them and to get us inspired on how they are prioritizing the protection of the 30% of the land and the ocean and aiming to achieve an ambitious post-2020 framework. I wish now to give the floor to my ocean co-chair, Minister of State of the UK, Lord Goldsmith, to deliver his opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Minister Meza, and thank you for inviting me to co-moderate this panel. I'm thrilled to be here to formally launch the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People. In a particularly challenging year for all of us, it's a real achievement to be where we are now. Both the High Ambition Coalition and the Global Ocean Alliance have made big strides to galvanize and grow support around the world. Between the two alliances, over 60 countries have now pledged their support for 30 by 30 in the ocean and almost as many on land. And it's crucial that this momentum continues. Each and every one of us depends fundamentally on the natural world around us, and yet we're destroying the natural world at a terrifying rate. And the science has never been more clear. Populations of key species have declined by more than 2/3 in my lifetime. Life is being hoovered out of the ocean at a rate that cannot be sustained. The world loses around 30 football pitches worth of forest every single minute. If these trends continue, we will pay a terrible price. And so it's never been more critical to meaningfully address the twin crises of biodiversity loss and climate change. 2021 presents us with numerous significant opportunities to do so. And today's One Planet Summit has been a fantastic start to the super year. And I'm proud that the UK announced its commitment to spend at least £1 billion of our international climate finance on climate change solutions that protect and restore nature and biodiversity over the next 5 years. There is no pathway to meeting the goals of the Paris Agreement that does not involve massive efforts to protect and restore ecosystems, both on land and in our ocean. And in the UK's capacity as Ocean co-chair of the High Ambition Coalition and founder of the Global Ocean Alliance, signatories to the Leaders' Pledge for Nature, and as hosts of the UNFCCC COP26, we are absolutely committed to taking decisive action and galvanizing the global transformative change needed to reverse biodiversity loss and climate change. And this starts here with pledging to protect at least 30% of the global ocean and land by 2030. I'm now very pleased to hand back to my co-moderator, Minister Meza, to introduce the format for this session.
Thank you, Minister. And now let's kick off our interactive session. Although this is a public event, we hope this conversation is among friends, and as such, together with my fellow moderator, we will try to guide you through it in a very informal and friendly way. In our discussion today, we will be going through some key elements, such as the interconnectedness of the crisis of climate change and biodiversity, as well as our role as a coalition of over 50 countries to ensure the effective management and governance of the protected areas, and discussing ways to ensure that adequate public and private resources are allocated, securing the integration of indigenous people, among other very interesting items. But I am very clear that you would like to hear more of our distinguished leaders. And for these, I will turn to my friend, Professor Fedaku Beyen, the Commissioner for Environment, Forest, and Climate Change of Ethiopia. Professor, could you share with us, as a mega diverse country, what actions are you country taking in order to support the 30 by 30 target? Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and Happy New Year from Addis Ababa. I would like to thank the co-chairs of the coalition for coordinating or co-organizing this ministerial high-level meeting during this year's edition of One Planet Summit. My country has been undertaking various actions in support of the 30-30 targets envisioned by the HAC. Ethiopia has recognized the importance of natural ecosystem preservation and restoration in its various developmental policies, programs, and strategies. Our interventions over the last years in the endeavors of conserving and protecting the nature and biodiversity have been primarily informed by our biodiversity conservation policy and the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, as well as the Climate Resilient Green Economy Strategy that put conserving, protecting, and restoring nature, biodiversity, and improving the livelihood of the community at this kernel. The recently launched 10 years National Development Plan of Ethiopia also clearly embraces the importance of protecting and restoring nature and biodiversity that provide us food, clean air, clean water, and stable climate. Practically, Ethiopia has been implementing its global commitment to restore 15 million hectares of degraded and deforested land through the African Forest Landscape Restoration Initiative, the Bond Challenge, and the New York Declaration. We are also implementing the Great Green Wall Initiative aimed at restoring 100 million hectares of degraded land in Africa by 2030. All of these are aimed at halting loss of species and protecting vital ecosystems and are sources of our economic security. Very recently, we launched the Green Legacy Initiative under the leadership of our Prime Minister, His Excellency Dr. Abiy Ahmed. The initiative aims at planting 20 billion tree seedlings over 4 years. We have thus far managed to plant more than 9 billion seedlings during the last 2 years. Besides, we have joined the ongoing global efforts to put nature and biodiversity on a path to recovery by 2030 through the Leaders' Pledge for Nature initiative. As a matter of fact, Ethiopia has already started to work boldly on most of the commitments stipulated under this pledge, including updating its NDC and preparing the long-term low-carbon development strategy, to mention a few. As to how the 3030 target is contributing to the fight against climate change, we know that the 3030 target envisioned by the hack clearly recognizes the enormous potential of nature to address various socio-economic, environmental challenges, and including climate change. In other words, the 3030 target encompasses untapped potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions through sequestration and to adapt and build resilient capacity to the adverse impacts of climate change through nature-based solutions, among others. I thank you.
Thank you, Professor Fedaku, for bringing all these remarks, highlighting the importance also of actions to reverse degradation, and also on how to use the different tools that we have as NDCs, long-term strategies, to be including nature as part of these important tools that we have for planning. And now, before giving the floor to my co-moderator, I would like to first turn to my friend and colleague, Minister of Environment and Climate Change of Canada, Jonathan Wilkinson. Minister, Canada is probably right now one of the largest countries of the coalition. So you have then probably the biggest challenge one way or the other. Let's say, it's a kind of remark about that. But it's very important then to be hearing how a country like Canada is doing, and it's integrating these elements to fight the degradation and the biodiversity loss with the climate change agenda. Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister, and certainly thank you for the invitation to be with all of you today. The biodiversity and climate crises are inextricably linked, as many have said. While nature is certainly under threat due to climate change, nature can also be a critical ally in the fight against climate change. As you noted, Minister, Canada is a very large country geographically. Large amounts of carbon are stored in Canada's forests, in our soils, wetlands, grasslands, and oceans. Conserving this intact carbon is key. We in Canada are investing in nature-based solutions to both protect and restore nature, including a plan to plant 2 billion trees. The current government of Canada has made the largest single investment in nature conservation in Canadian history in 2018, and we made significant progress in protecting ecosystems, including exceeding the global 2020 oceans protection target. We did that early by boosting the amount of conserved coastal and ocean areas from 1% to nearly 14% between 2015 and 2019. And we know that more needs to be done. To ensure that Canada makes steady progress to 30% protection of terrestrial and ocean areas by 2030, we have set ourselves a nearer term domestic target of 25% by 2025. And we have a clear plan to achieve those goals that reflects the varied conditions of our country, because our conservation opportunities vary substantially by region. We thus have a three-part or three-region approach. Firstly, in southern Canada, we have large cities, significant population density, high agricultural productivity, and significant manufacturing activities. Here we are working with local governments to expand urban parks and looking at how to support ecological corridors that will secure endangered species and important ecosystems. This will help to fix carbon. It will provide access to nature for the millions of Canadians who live in our southern regions, and it will provide recreational opportunities for our citizens' physical and mental health. Secondly, in middle Canada, where much of our iconic wildlife and famous national parks are located, we have significant energy, forestry, and mining industries. Here we are establishing interconnected protected areas and other effective area-based conservation measures in order to secure carbon and increase habitat values while continuing to work on sustainable natural resource-based industries. And thirdly, in northern Canada, we have some of the largest wilderness areas left on this planet, which hold some of the largest terrestrial carbon stocks and have globally significant values for many species. We are working to create and support the creation of large protected and conserved areas on land and sea. Throughout these three varied approaches, we are working very closely with Canada's Indigenous peoples. Indigenous peoples have long been stewards and managers of lands and waters and leaders in ecosystem conservation in this country. Since 2018, we have invested more than $100 million to support the establishment of Indigenous protected and conserved areas and Indigenous guardians projects to support their stewardship of traditional lands, waters, and ice. Together with our partners, we will protect 30% of Canada's land and ocean by 2030 with impactful actions that improve the state of biodiversity and the climate in every region of our country. Perhaps Canada's approach to the varied conditions of our country could be useful to the HAC to consider as we work together to meet the global target of 30% by 2030. We certainly in Canada look forward to working with the HAC to achieve the 30% by 2030 goal, which is integral to creating an equitable, nature positive, and carbon neutral future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister Wilkinson, and good to see you again. It's really inspiring what you've just told us, not least the recognition of the need for nearer term targets against which today's politicians can be held to account, but as well as that, a very clear plan for achieving what is a really ambitious vision. And I'm struck by the speed with which Canada has got to grips with its new MPAs, and I think that in and of itself is a model, I think, for lots of other countries to learn from. And finally, the importance of Indigenous people. It's not a coincidence that the majority of the world's intact ecosystems are inhabited by Indigenous people. We have an enormous amount to learn from Indigenous communities. I have the huge honor now of giving the floor to the Minister of the Environment for the Republic of Rwanda, Her Excellency Dr. Jean Mujawa Maria. So the floor is yours, Minister, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you very much, Goldsmith, Honorable colleague, Ms. Andrea Meza, Executive Director, CBD, Honorable Ministers, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are now. I extend my warm greetings from Kigali and wish you Happy New Year. It is a pleasure to be part of this important discussion, interactive dialogue on this high ambition coalition for nature and people ministerial high level event. As a response to the question we were asked about the domestic actions that our country is taking in order to support the 30 by 30 target, and in our view, how the 30 by 30 target is contributing to the fight against climate change. Rwanda, as you all know, is geographically located to the rich Albertine Rift hotspot, which is one of the most biodiverse regions of the African continent. With more than half of Africa's birds, 40% of Africa's mammals, and about 20% of its amphibians and plants. It contains more vertebrate species than anywhere else on the continent. It also conserves more threatened and endemic species than any other region of Africa. And as a result, Rwanda is a biodiversity hotspot, an endemic bird area. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, Rwanda is committed to, over the next decade, to 1, promoting biodiversity conservation, including the revitalization and expansion of national parks, to contribute to a global target of 30% of land and sea under protection by 2030, maintaining at least 10.3% of land area under protection, and exploring the possibility of more national designations. Recently, Gishwati Mukura, one of our parks, was recognized by UNESCO as Biosphere Reserve. Rwanda is committed to mobilize resources and budget spent on biodiversity preservation and restoration from current 0.9% to 2% of the national GDP. In line with a broader goal to globally commit to double the percentage of GDP spent on biodiversity preservation and restoration. Thirdly, Rwanda is committed to maintaining at least 30% of the country's forest cover, thus increasing carbon stocks and contributing to climate change mitigation and adaptation. Rwanda will undertake an audit of current information systems and data streams and establish Rwanda has designated for the last 15 years to additional protected areas, Nyungwe National Park in 2005 and Gishwati Mukura National Parks in 2016. And we are promoting transboundary collaboration in biodiversity conservation and sustainable development. Rwanda is committed to striving to prevent the extinction of threatened species, particularly for those that are most at risk of extinction, and restore species of ecological importance and maintain the ecological balance. Rwanda is restoring keystone species in its national parks, like lions in 2016 and rhinos in 2018 Akagera National Parks. On how 20 by 30 target is contributing to the fight against climate change, the 30 by 30 target is contributing to maintain biodiversity and defend against climate change's related impact. Furthermore, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it would preserve the integrity of ecosystems on which we all depend, provide conducive, livable environment to help wildlife to adapt to the climate change and sustain natural systems that store carbon, such as forests and wetlands. I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Minister, thank you very much for your contribution. And I think Rwanda has shown such extraordinary leadership on so many levels, doing really impressive work that I'm associated with actually through the Commonwealth as CHOGM chair, including work on expanding national parks. And I really look forward to the leadership that you will be showing as chair. And I applaud your high ambition. And I invite you also to join the Global Ocean Alliance and commit to the same target for ocean. Now, unfortunately, thank you so much. Unfortunately, our colleague from the Netherlands has been pulled away at short notice. But I'm delighted to be able to introduce Minister Jan.11th, Minister of Environment of Slovakia, and one of the newest members of the coalition. Minister, you have the floor, and could I ask you, as I'm asked to remind you, to be brief as the clock is ticking. Thank you, Minister. Over to you.
Slovenska. A chcem sa poďakovať organizátorom tejto koalície.
Dear friends, greetings from Slovakia. I'd like to thank the organizers of this coalition.
Slovensko nemá more, na rozdiel od týchto troch krajín.
As opposed to these three countries, which are the leading countries, Slovakia does not have any sea.
Naše rieky sa vlievajú do Dunaja, ale na konci aj my sa zúčastňujeme toho, čo sa vlieva do mora a cítime spolu zodpovednosť za všetky globálne ciele, ktoré si koalícia predsavzala.
Though our rivers all flow into the seas anyway at the end of the day, so we do feel as part of the overall effort, and we do share the responsibility of the entire coalition of the other countries towards common targets.
Slovensko v týchto týždňoch prežíva vrchol pandémie, podobne ako aj mnohé iné európske krajiny.
These weeks, Slovakia, just like many other European countries, has been going through the peak, we believe, of the COVID pandemic.
Za normálnych okolností sme stále v rúškach.
Under normal circumstances, we continue wearing face masks.
Ale ja tú skúsenosť spoločnosti nehodnotím iba ako negatívnu.
But I do not personally perceive that experience of the entire society as necessarily negative one.
Nastala obrovské pochopenie, že medzi pandémiou COVID a biodiverzitou je súvislosť.
There has been a major understanding that there is a close connection, in fact, between the COVID pandemic and that of biodiversity.
Ľudia, ktorí sa nezaujímali o životné prostredie, zrazu sú iniciatívni.
People who were never concerned about the environment are all of a sudden showing high initiative.
Podarilo sa nám presadiť oveľa viac nových rezervácií a chránených území než v minulosti.
We were able in Slovakia to pursue introducing many more reservations and protected areas than ever before in the past.
12 nových chránených území len za niekoľko minulých mesiacov.
There have been 12 only over the past several months, 12 new protected areas that we have introduced.
A nový rok sme začali s úspechom, o ktorý usilovali environmentalisti dlhé roky, celoročnou ochranou vlka dravého.
The new year, this year 2021, has been opened by our ministry with something that has been a dream for many years of many environmentalists here in Slovakia, and that is making the wild wolf a protected species.
Slovensko má mimoriadnu biodiverzitu.
Slovakia has extraordinary biodiversity.
Sú to karpatské lesy, medzi ktorými sme začali chrániť aj tie zvyšky karpatských pralesov, ktoré sme tu naozaj objavili, ktoré tu stále žijú.
These are Carpathian forests, for instance, among which we also have been able to continue protecting remains of primeval forests that have been existing here for millennia.
Mojím veľkým cieľom je naozaj obrátiť drámu, ktorú prežívame s pandémiou COVID-19 na prospešnú stranu mince.
It is a great goal of mine to actually be able to flip the current COVID pandemic drama on the other side, completely on the beneficial side of the coin.
Ľudia nakoniec sú obmedzovaní v takých právach, že si to vôbec nevedeli predstaviť.
People end up being limited and in so many rights they were never able to imagine that in the past.
Boli sme prinútení vzdať sa mnohej zábavy, o ktorej sme si nevedeli predstaviť, že o ňu prídeme.
We were forced, for instance, to give up many types of entertainment that we never have dreamed of before, never be able to pursue.
A ľudia objavili, že to, čo tu zostáva a to, čo je pre nich bezpečné, je les, príroda, biodiverzita.
And people have in fact rediscovered that something that is here, it's available and safe for them, that is the forest and biodiversity. That is something they are able now to enjoy.
Považujem našu koalíciu za hybnú silu, ktorá môže pomôcť aj mne v mojej krajine presadzovať ochranu biodiverzity ešte razantnejšie.
And we consider the Hack Coalition as a momentum, as an engine really of something which enable me in turn back in our country to pursue even more stringent biodiversity protective measures.
Každý predovšetkým musíme vybojovať zápas s vlastnou ľahostajnosťou a niekedy ziskuchtivosťou.
Each one of us,
Každý národ.
each one of our nations, in fact, meets a stage in their history when they have to face and tackle our own indifference and our own interest in profit and have to change that attitude to both.
Naša koalícia chce nastaviť svet na iný pohľad na biodiverzitu.
This coalition aims to completely review and reset the world's view upon biodiversity.
Ja nie som už najmladší a preto niekedy mám pocit, že sme veľmi veľa premeškali.
I am among not the youngest in individuals, and sometimes I get the impression that we have wasted much time.
Pamätám si, keď sme šírili, ako sa mi zdá, materiály rímskeho klubu. To boli 70. roky.
I remember still we were distributing of the Roma Club paperwork and materials, which was the 1970s.
U nás v sovietskej zóne sa za to zatváralo.
And here in former Czechoslovakia, as part of the former Soviet zone, people were put in jail for that.
A zdá sa, že tie mnohé roky akoby stále sme čakali na dôkaz, že skutočne máme planétu iba jednu.
And it seems that all those years we were just waiting for evidence that we truly only have one planet.
Veľmi si vážim iniciatívu Francie, Británie a Kostariky, ktorá môže urobiť predel za tým váhaním.
I appreciate very much the initiative of France, United Kingdom, and Costa Rica that now we able together to make a major threshold which we can put behind ourselves and make progress ahead.
Potrebujeme presné ciele a globálnu kontrolu proti ničeniu biodiverzity.
We need specific goals and targets and very global control against destruction of biodiversity.
Chcem ešte raz pozdraviť všetkých ministrov a účastníkov tejto akcie, tejto veľmi dôležitej akcie.
So, and allow me conclude by sending once again our greetings to all distinguished ministers and all other participants of this very important event.
A pripomenúť, že aj v Strednej Európe sú spojenci našej globálneho úsilia.
And to remind everyone that also even in Central Europe, there are allies of our global effort.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Minister, thank you so much for the commitment you've made, but also thank you for your very powerful words and your even more powerful call to action. And thank you also, I have to say, for the protections you've extended to the wild wolf and to the Carpathian forests. A great example you show the world. We are out of time for this session, so I want to thank all ministerial panelists for sharing their views and for their commitments so far. We are going to take a short pause now to watch a video, and then I believe we're switching to a different panel, but we will be back shortly. Thank you.
Thank you for your patience, and I hope you have enjoyed the video. Now we will continue with this second panel. We have very distinguished leaders, ministers, and now I will like to introduce my friend, Minister of Forests, Oceans, Environment and Climate Change of the Gabonese Republic, Lee White. And again, Lee, we would like to hear from your view, your perspective. How is the 30 by 30 target contributed to fight against climate change? And how is Gabon supporting this 30 by 30 target? Mr. Lee White, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and great to see everybody here today talking about this important subject. I think if we look at Gabon, Gabon is 88% covered in forest. We're up to 21% protected areas on land. The president created a whole series of 20 marine protected areas 2 years ago, which brings us up to 27% protected in the oceans. We're working on a series of 3 or 4 new national parks on land. So as a country, we are committed to 30-30, and we are taking steps to get there, hopefully before 2030. We could even conceivably get there by 2025. We'll see how that goes. And obviously, that 30% figure is important, but in a country like Gabon, where that leaves another 50% or more of tropical rainforest outside of the protected areas, then managing the forests, making living forests important to the Gabonese people, finding ways to create livelihoods and riches from forests that are being exploited sustainably for timber or for non-timber forest products is equally critical. So I think the protection of the creation of protected areas is critical. Protected areas tend to be areas where there's no disturbance. And so in terms of our biodiversity strategy, we'll probably find that 50 to 60% of our biodiversity is protected in those 30% of pristine protected areas. But then we need to look at sustainable management of other natural areas, natural resources, to bring that complement up. And protected areas around the world play an important role in fighting climate change. But again, if you look across the Congo Basin, if we only protect the protected areas, we lose the battle against climate change. We need the protected areas maybe as a foundation. We need them as an insurance policy, because in worked forests, we're going to lose certain aspects of the biodiversity, so we may need to restore things in the future. But then we really need to look across the Congo Basin, which is so important for this battle against climate change, both above and below ground, because you have the huge stocks of carbon locked up in the forest, but huge stocks of carbon locked up in the soil as well, in the peat areas across the 2 Congos and Gabon. And so we need to extend this thinking outside of the protected areas, and we need to find ways to make these critical ecosystems more valuable to countries like Gabon and the people of Gabon as standing forests and intact ecosystems than they are transformed into something much less rich and therefore much less resilient, with fewer ecosystem services. And so that's the approach that we're taking in Gabon. And it's an approach that we're talking a lot about all across the Congo Basin as we work together to try and preserve the Congo Basin forests.
Thank you, Minister, for all these inspiring words and hearing the leadership that you're having, not only in the Congo Basin area, but also in the marine protected areas. And what you are saying, that probably you will be achieving the target maybe in 2025. That's really inspiring, and that's the kind of leadership that we need. And also for bringing the element of the importance of landscape management. We need pristine areas, but we also need these other areas to be managed, and we need this balance. So thank you very much for these remarks. And before giving the floor to my co-moderator, I would like now to ask the Commissioner for the European Commission for Environment, Oceans and Fisheries. I'm not really sure if I'm going to pronounce this very well. Mr. Virginius, I'm sorry, Minister, Commissioner, but the floor is yours. Now we would like to hear the good news from the European Commission on how you are approaching this target. And I'm sorry for the pronunciation of your last name. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And of course, Happy New Year to everyone. And I'm honored and so happy to be in such a great company of like-minded leaders. Of course, it's my pleasure to participate in this roundtable and stand proud to be part of this coalition, which of course I hope to see grow day by day. The EU, meaning all 27 member states, has made a collective commitment to protect at least 30% of its land and seas by 2030. And that's at the heart of our shared strategy for biodiversity. We had a commitment for 20% by 2020. We have increased that for 30 up to 2030. And our commitments also include strictly protecting 1/3 of our protected areas, including all our primary and old growth forests, and improving their effective management with clear objectives and, of course, proper monitoring. But we all probably know that very well that protection is not enough. We have also made a strong commitment to nature restoration and to enabling transformative change across sectors of the economy. And we adopted these measures in the first wave of the pandemic. And they are a central element of the EU recovery plan, part of our strategy to build back better, greener, and of course, more resilient. Last but not least, we are committed to a high level of ambition and to undertake all efforts to adopt a common, transformative, and ambitious post-2020 global biodiversity framework at the next conference of parties. On the climate question, the fact that nature conservation and ecosystem restoration are key for climate mitigation and adaptation is, of course, beyond doubt. The biodiversity and the climate crisis are interlinked. And so are many of the solutions. Nature and healthy ecosystems are our best ally in the fight against climate change. And that's why we must restore wetlands, peatlands, and coastal ecosystems and ensure sustainable management for marine areas, forests, grasslands, and of course, agricultural soils, and also deploy green infrastructure, including in our cities, in urban areas. And that's why, for example, we have committed to planting 3 billion additional trees by 2030. A planetary emergency demands a unified response. So we were very happy to endorse the Leaders' Pledge for Nature, and we strongly encourage the rest of the world to follow. And lastly, we shouldn't frame this as a crisis response. It's actually a huge opportunity, a chance to rebuild a better world. And that's a message of hope, a message the world needs to hear. And of course, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, Commissioner, for your commitment and for your words. You make the point that protection alone is not enough, that in order to make good on the commitments that we're all making here as part of this coalition, we need to engage in restoration on really an unprecedented scale. So thank you, and you're absolutely right to identify this moment, not just as a crisis, as a threat, but also as an opportunity, and it's there for us to take should we want to. And before I hand over to our next panelist, I want to just thank Lee White for the leadership that he's showing in providing in Gabon. I think Gabon is one of the countries in the world that's perhaps most ambitious and doing most to restore sanity in relation to the relationship we have with the natural world. And I think what he is doing is really of global importance. Now, I'm very pleased now to introduce Her Excellency Lea Wermelin, I hope I pronounced that right, the Minister of the Environment of Denmark, who is going to give her reflections on the work that Denmark is doing to support the 30 by 30 protection targets domestically. Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, distinguished colleagues, participants, ladies and gentlemen. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I would truly echo the message of hope that the Commissioner just pronounced just before, because protecting nature and fighting climate change are also key priorities for Denmark. We are very much committed to reaching an ambitious agreement on global biodiversity at the COP15. And therefore, I'm also happy to announce that we have joined the Global Ocean Alliance, the Blue Leaders, and the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People. And I look very much forward to working for a global goal of 30% protected areas on land as well as in the oceans. We depend on nature, and I'm happy that we in Denmark last month were able to present a new political agreement for nature and biodiversity, which will give an economical boost to improve the nature and biodiversity here in Denmark. With the agreement, we're able to strengthen large, cohesive areas of nature, leaving more nature to become wilder, and set aside more forests, among other things. So in a Danish context, this is a historical political agreement for nature. And I also wanted to stress that during the pandemic, we've seen more and more Danes turning to nature sites and rediscovering the importance of nature. And I believe it is an important development that will also contribute to a more green and sustainable future, because the more people know about the nature, the more they also want to protect it. So as a country surrounded by the sea as well, protecting the marine environment is a priority for us. And that is why we're in the process of exploring how we should designate new marine protected areas in Denmark in order to reach good environmental status in the oceans, reduce the adverse effects of human activities, preserve fish stocks, and improve the ocean's resilience against climate change. And I was happy to know that these are also steps taken by other countries of this alliance. Our national actions will contribute to our joint global initiatives and coalitions that call for 30% of global protection of the oceans. And halting the loss of biodiversity and mitigating climate change is no easy task, but we must tackle both crises. And I see it as the same opportunity as the EU Commissioner did just before. The crises are interlinked, and so can some of the solutions be. To create a more green and sustainable future, it's crucial that we look into nature-based solutions as well. Solutions that conserve and restore ecosystems and ecosystem services, but also play an important role in adapting to climate changes. So I hope that the CBD post-2020 agreement can be for nature what it has been for, what the Paris Agreement has been for climate. And to achieve this, I think that we must come together as this global alliance is working for in order to reach this ambitious agreement at the COP15, including the very important goal of 30% protected areas on land and sea. So I look so much forward to working with all of you, and thank you very much for hosting this very inspiring evening it is in Denmark.
Minister, thank you so much for your commitment. I'm very excited to learn more about the new settlement for nature that has been agreed in Denmark. And thank you for joining the Global Ocean Alliance. And you make the point that the CBD must have the same effect for nature as Paris has had in relation to climate. And absolutely, that is a goal we must all share. Our final panelist is the Secretary of State for the Ministry of Environment, Water and Forest of Romania, His Excellency Mr. Jan.11th Stana. Minister, Secretary of State, even the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It is a great pleasure to have the opportunity to participate today to this event. Romania fully supports the Coalition for Nature and People initiative, and we consider that in the current pandemic situation, it is necessary to intensify our effort to stop the loss of biodiversity and trigger the transformation changes at global level for the all well-being of the human population. As we all know, the last decade have been marked by the process of environmental degradation. The signals were clear. We observed depletion of the resource, ecosystem destruction, extinction of some species, as well as toxic effect of products resulting from the transformation process. These products have accumulated and concentrated in water, soil, and air. The reaction of these trends intensified and diversified, and over the time, the effects were linked with a series of harmful human activities. The over-exploitation of renewable and non-renewable resources associated with poor management has become one of the most dynamic forces for the degradation of natural capital for the entire ecosphere. Regarding the alarming increase in extinction rate of plants and animal species, I believe it is mandatory to include the academic environment to identify vulnerable species and to implement the necessary protection programs. We must focus our effort to the ecological system in order to conserve and protect biodiversity and to integrate in this all vulnerable species. To ensure the connectivity between different types of natural and semi-natural ecosystem, Romania strives to take efficient measures by creating natural corridors and conducting ecological reconstruction works for the restoration of degraded habitats. It is my strong belief that conservation of biodiversity and natural habitats should be a priority for government policies and scientific debates. Furthermore, it is necessary to promote our commitment in the field of biodiversity conservation, to accelerate the implementation of activities for sustainable development, to strengthen the international cooperation, and also to develop partnership with civil society. I would like to conclude by expressing my strong belief that this event organized today will represent a good opportunity to share our existing experience, being also an occasion for further explore new area of cooperation in order to overcome these challenges and meet our new objectives. Thank you very much.
Secretary of State, thank you so much for your commitment and for your words. And thank you for raising also the issue, the importance of nature corridors and of pollution, which we can protect all the land that we need to protect. But if we don't tackle the issues around pollution, then much of that work will be for nothing. So thank you for raising that issue and for the work that you're doing. That concludes this panel discussion. And so it falls to me, before handing over to my co-chair, to thank you very much indeed to all ministerial colleagues for taking the time to join us today. Given that we know now, without any doubt, that there is no pathway to tackling climate change or indeed reversing biodiversity loss or tackling poverty without massive increased efforts around protecting and restoring the natural world. That means logically that a good climate COP is going to have implications for the biodiversity COP just a few months before, and a good biodiversity COP is going to have implications in relation to climate. And the more we can see these two critically important moments within a common framework, the more likely we are to reach the right solutions, and solutions which match the scale of the problem. Everyone on this call today has made big commitments to take ambitious action on biodiversity loss. We're going to need to work together to galvanize action from all parties and all sectors of society. And I'm really looking forward to working together with many of you to continue this work towards securing the adoption of the 30 by 30 target at the CBD. We have a huge amount to achieve before that conference, but undoubtedly today is a big milestone in creating a better deal for nature and in creating the kind of momentum that we're going to need to see. So thank you again so much to all my colleagues for your participation. And I'm now very pleased to hand back to my co-moderator, Minister Meza.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you to all the panelists for all these inspiring words and commitments. And I will just add one more reflection on this, that this year we have the responsibility to turn our commitments into real action. I think that this is what we really need to see to deliver, and under this common framework. And I totally agree of what my co-moderator Goldsmith just mentioned. We need to have this integrated framework and to continue the ambition under CBD discussions and the climate COP discussions. And we know we are going to achieve very good and concrete results if we have this integrated approach. So thank you very much to all of you. And now I would like to handle to the co-moderation to Mary Robinson. Mrs. Robinson, the floor is yours.
Thank you, co-chairs, for such an interesting panel. It's very encouraging to hear from so many ministers placing biodiversity and the 30 by 30 target at the front and center of their priorities. For our next session, we'll hear individual messages from a series of ministers from around the world. The following remarks underscore the critical leadership in biodiversity conservation from ministers of environment of Spain, Peru, the United Arab Emirates, and Japan. So let's hear these videos.
The relationship between human beings and nature is out of balance. More than 1 million species are facing the risk of disappearance in the coming decades. This is a very strong warning coming from the Global Assessment on Biodiversity issued in 2019. And the losses of different species is not just a matter that impacts on wildlife. It also impacts in the way we live, in the way we produce what we need to feed us, in the way we produce our welfare and our comfort relies very much on the healthy environment where we live in. This is why we need to strive all our efforts to strengthen all our policies in order to facilitate a deep change in the way we produce and consume, in the way we protect the nature. And this is why regional and multilateral cooperation is very important. This is why this alliance intends to ensure that at least 30% of the species are protected before 2030. And the global framework for biodiversity becomes a reality. We need to ensure that this happens. It is a question of survival for ourselves.
Dear Ministers of the Environment, high-level authorities, special guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor and a real pleasure for Peru to participate today in the launch event of the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People, an initiative aimed to strengthen global efforts to preserve our natural heritage, especially in a context where biodiversity is being increasingly threatened and consequently negative repercussions on the quality of life and the health of people and ecosystems are more than evident all over the world. This gathering is also relevant because the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties of the CDB, planned to happen next May, will define the new post-2020 global framework for biodiversity, where the world must set goals to jointly address the drivers of biodiversity loss, which will allow us to build a most needed new relationship with nature. Taking this into account, we consider essential that countries continue with a strengthened action to mainstream biodiversity into productive systems, applying an ecosystem approach, adaptive management, and productive conservation. In the case of Peru, to achieve the ambitious 30 by 30 goal, we will focus our efforts in 1. The creation of our first fully marine protected area, the Nazca Ridge National Reserve, a 62,000 square kilometer area aimed to protect a sample of unique seamounts, which will mean an increase of 6.5% of effective conservation in our marine realm. Second, the promotion of the establishment of new regional level conservation areas and private conservation areas, especially those located in ecosystems which are currently less represented in the Peruvian Protected Areas system. The High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People is so important, as is it committed to achieve healthy and preserved ecosystems, not unproductive or stagnant ones, but vibrant and providing fundamental contributions for humanity as livelihood for billions, food safety, secure water, or the stabilization of climate. Thank you very much.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the United Arab Emirates congratulates the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People on its official launch. We thank the co-chairs Costa Rica and France, and the Ocean Chair, the United Kingdom, for convening this high-level event, and applaud our fellow coalition members for their dedication to protecting 30% of our planet by 2030. Protected areas play a key role in safeguarding ecosystems that help preserve biodiversity and contribute to climate change mitigation and adaptation. The United Arab Emirates has 49 protected areas that counts for over 15% of its territory, including 10 wetlands of international importance and 2 UNESCO man and biosphere reserves. The country also focuses on blue carbon ecosystems, including mangrove forests that are more effective carbon sinks than terrestrial forests. Given that mangroves capture over 1 million tons of carbon dioxide in the United Arab Emirates annually, we have committed to planting 30 million mangrove seedlings by 2030 as part of the country's second nationally determined contribution under the Paris Agreement. We look forward to reaping the benefits of healthy and thriving blue carbon ecosystems for years to come. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much.
It is my real pleasure to take part in this important event in the process toward CBD COP15. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to President Emmanuel Macron and all those who have led the effort in organizing the One Planet Summit and this ministerial meeting under the current difficult situation of the COVID-19 pandemic. First, I'm very pleased to convey Japan's decision to join the High Ambition Coalition. Japan is ready to work with many other participating countries to set ambitious and realistic targets for the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. Last October, Japan's Prime Minister Suga pledged to cut the country's greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050. Just after that, Japan joined the Climate Ambition Alliance as well. On my part, I will do everything in my power, including specifying the 2050 climate neutrality objective in the Climate Change Countermeasures Law to achieve this goal. I firmly believe that this will also play an important role in bringing about solutions to biodiversity issues. Let me also remind you that Japan has advanced the Satoyama Initiative together with many partners. This initiative places much emphasis on natural resources in local areas and promotes designing of thriving local communities through the sustainable use of such resources. A thriving local community will provide not only solutions to biodiversity issues, but also resilience against intensifying natural disasters due to climate change and emerging infectious diseases. Thus, the initiative would also adequately serve the purposes of this coalition. Japan will continue to promote the Satoyama initiative to address those issues based on the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. Let us galvanize international actions in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic to redesign the whole of our socio-economic system and work toward the realization of the 2050 vision, which we shared in Aichi, living in harmony with nature. Thank you. Arigato.
Following those very inspiring messages, I'd now like to introduce the videos from ministers and vice ministers of Pakistan, Portugal, Colombia, Switzerland, and Mexico. Let's hear those videos.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Pakistan is very happy to be joining the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People. And we are committed to the 30 by 30 target of protecting 30% of our biodiversity by 2030. I think this is absolutely essential for us to survive as a species on this earth, because our relationship with nature is really fractured, and the pandemic and this zoonotic disease that we are going through right now is one of the consequences of this fractured relationship with nature. We need to heal it, and we need to heal it now. So I think this High Ambition Coalition is extremely important to go in that direction. Now, Pakistan is not just committed to this talk, but we're also walking the talk in our country. We've got two big initiatives on nature-based solutions. One is the 10 billion tree tsunami, in which we are now planting 10 billion trees in Pakistan, which is also going to be restoring 1 million hectares of forests by 2023. The other project that we have initiated is called the Protected Areas Initiative. This is not only protecting our biodiversity, but also we've set ourselves a target of at least achieving 15% of our land as protected by 2023. At the moment, we are at 12% of our land. So again, this is a very clearly target-driven initiative, and we have already announced 15 new national parks in the last 8 months, which has added on to the 30 national parks that we already had over the last 50 years. So it's been a 50% increase in just 8 months. So we are truly committed to this solution of nature, and we are truly committed to the High Ambition Coalition for Nature's 30 by 30 target, and we urge all nations to do the same, because as I said, we need to heal our relationship with nature, and we need to do it now. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to start by congratulating Costa Rica, France, and the United Kingdom for this initiative, in which I'm honored to participate. This marks the first international event where I intervene while holding the presidency of the Council of the EU. Portugal welcomes the launch of the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People, stressing the importance to reverse the severe trend on biodiversity loss. In fact, the need to find a sustainable balance between biodiversity, nature conservation, natural capital, and the consumption patterns was clearly shown during this last month. There is an urgent need to reverse the current trends of biodiversity loss and ecosystem degradation facing current environmental changes. Therefore, we are committed to protect at least 30% of land and sea through protected areas and other effective area-based conservation measures by 2030. We are working on the enlargement of our protected areas network by creating up to 6 new protected areas under the Habitats Directive. Also, given land use change as one of the main drivers of biodiversity loss, we shall strengthen policy lines directly linked to territorial active management. Portugal is willing to take nature-based solutions to fight against climate change, especially in forests and wetland habitats, due to their highly valuable regulation and support services. Furthermore, the commitment to enlarge protected areas is also related to the acknowledgement of the ecosystem services value as carbon sequestration and storage or disaster risk regulation. In this context, Portugal considers the need to act promptly and globally to reach more ambitious targets to address biodiversity loss and mitigate climate change. We believe that a coalition between nature and people must be founded on the true involvement of all stakeholders in biodiversity protection and nature conservation policies. Finally, Portugal looks forward to contributing to the new and high and ambitious global biodiversity framework to be adopted at the 15th Conference of the Parties of the Convention of Biological Diversity, as well as to promote nature-based solutions within the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the COP26. Thank you.
Colombia cree que esta coalición ha cumplido un buen propósito al promover la meta de 30 por 30. Al mismo tiempo que promovemos otros elementos relevantes para cumplir con esta meta. Necesitamos asegurar que nuestros sistemas de áreas protegidas sean representativos, efectivos, conectados y equitativos, y que tengan la sostenibilidad financiera para ser funcionales. Resalto que en el segundo objetivo de esta coalición es la promoción de soluciones basadas en la naturaleza. Como coalición, deberíamos concebir una estrategia para mejorar la comprensión de este concepto y su adopción en el marco de las negociaciones del Convenio sobre la Diversidad Biológica. Además, el tercer objetivo de la coalición es abordar otros temas relacionados con el marco post-2020, que son relevantes para alcanzar el objetivo del 30 por 30. En este sentido, Colombia viene analizando temas cruciales, como la movilización de recursos y la Estrategia Nacional de Economía Circular. Como país comprometido con el proceso post-2020 y con la coalición, Colombia quisiera llamar la atención sobre algunos puntos. La estrategia que debe seguir la coalición es participar activamente en las próximas reuniones que definirán el futuro de las convenciones internacionales de medio ambiente y tener una fuerte incidencia en estas negociaciones. Creemos firmemente que tenemos que ir juntos como grupo a las negociaciones del marco post-2020 y posicionar estos importantes intereses para el mundo. El tiempo se acaba y la incertidumbre, si pudiéramos reunirnos en persona, sigue siendo muy alta, inclusive durante este año 2021. Queremos avanzar con reuniones virtuales que permitan avances significativos en las negociaciones, asegurando al mismo tiempo la participación plena y equitativa de las partes y observadores. Invito como miembro de esta coalición a vislumbrar cómo vamos a llegar a la PRECOP, a ser hospedados por Colombia en Cali, tomando en cuenta la perspectiva política y los resultados ambiciosos de las negociaciones que esperamos. Esta coalición es la única asociación con representación de alto nivel en el proceso post-2020. No nos quedemos cortos en nuestras expectativas y aprovechemos la reprogramación de las negociaciones para intercambiar nuestras opiniones y, cuando sea posible, consolidar posiciones comunes como grupo en reuniones relevantes del proceso.
Excellencies, dear friends, biodiversity is our very livelihood. It is the natural resource base for all life on Earth, fundamental for our well-being, prosperity, and ultimately our survival. But biodiversity is threatened globally, but also locally. A world without biodiversity is not acceptable. We have to make sure that it is protected and used sustainably. This requires national and international action and effective cooperation. Therefore, we need a robust framework that guides and pressures We need an ambitious post-2020 global biodiversity framework with relevant, clear and measurable goals, targets and indicators that is comprehensive and synergetic and embraces all biodiversity-related agreements and institutions, and that ensures implementation by and accountability of all parties. And to get there, we need the High Ambition Coalition to strategize, to cooperate, and to influence the negotiation process. I therefore sincerely thank Costa Rica for having initiated the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People more than 1 year ago. Dear colleagues, let us work together towards these objectives. Let us engage in the negotiations process. High ambition needs political support, political drive, and hard technical work. It requires engagement of the HAC members at all levels, at ministerial and at negotiators level. Thank you for your engagement and support of High Ambition for Biodiversity and for the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. I look forward to celebrate together with you our success at COP15 in Kunming.
Dear Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, in the face of the accelerated global loss of biodiversity, which has been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with our commitments to strengthen the post-2020 global biodiversity framework, Mexico is proud to announce our support to the Coalition of High Ambition for Nature and People. We are very pleased to become part of this global initiative and to support the hack towards the protection of the 30% of the planet by 2030. Mexico believes this goal is crucial to continue promoting sustainable development and ensuring resilient ecosystems and healthy communities. From now on, we need to think on nature's conservation and people's health as a single, interdependent and indivisible agenda. For Mexico, the protection and sustainable management of natural resources and natural areas is a national priority, and we have made significant progress during the past decade. However, we still have a long way to go, and we are committed to finding the best way to increase ambition in the protection of biodiversity and ecosystems for the next generations. Our country is seeking to increase its percentage of protected natural areas, and we are exploring other effective area-based conservation measures that will contribute substantially to the hack. We would like to encourage other countries to do the same and galvanize transformative challenge in the adoption of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework that considers ecosystems as the core element for development and recovery. The COVID-19 pandemic has showed us the importance of cooperation and partnerships to address global problems. We believe this must be the same case for biodiversity. Therefore, we celebrate that today we begin this journey together. We are eager to take this action towards the achievement of a future where people live in harmony with nature.
Greetings from Ireland. I'm speaking to you from Bull Island, an internationally important wetland in the heart of Dublin Bay. This unique habitat is the most protected place in Ireland. It is designated on the EU Birds Directive, the EU Habitats Directive and the Ramsar Convention, and it's a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. It's also only 30 minutes from Dublin city centre by bicycle and is deeply cherished by the many people who visit here every day, and more so during the COVID-19 pandemic. Nothing is more important than nature. It's our first and it's our best line of defence against climate change. It provides us with food, fresh air and clean water. And in taking time to notice it, we humans connect with the wonder of life. Reversing biodiversity loss is a major social economic challenge that requires profound transformation on value chains, on business models and patterns of human behaviour and consumption. As we enter the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration and prepare for the Convention on Biological Diversity's Conference of the Parties in China, we know there is no time to lose in taking action. As Minister of State with responsibility for natural heritage, I'm progressing an ambitious agenda to protect, restore and create biodiverse habitats across Ireland and engage people across all sectors of society in its conservation. I'd like to thank France and Costa Rica for their leadership on this One Planet Summit. I and my colleagues in the Irish Government look forward to working with the partners around the world through the High Ambition Coalition to advance our shared goals for nature in line with the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Le chéile, táimí den ann rudí iontacha buinte amach do nádúr, gur míle maith.
It's an honor for me to be joining the high-level launch for the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People, advocating for the expansion of protected areas to at least 30% by 2030. We're at a very decisive turning point for the planet. Our obligation to future generations is for us to work together urgently to preserve our natural resources before it's too late. The linkages between land degradation, climate change and biodiversity loss have been clearly established by all our scientific bodies, and it's because of these linkages that protected areas are so vital to our efforts to preserve the planet. Natural ecosystems play a crucial role in the sequestration of carbon to reduce greenhouse gases. Protected areas are key to preserving the carbon sequestration potential of our ecosystems. Nigeria is strongly committed to taking bold steps to reverse the extinction crisis and to mitigate against climate change. In our bid to expand our protected areas, Nigeria has recently designated 10 new national parks across the ecological zones of the country. 2 of these are designated marine protected areas. They are the Apoi National Park and the Dumenum National Park in Bayelsa State of Nigeria. We have also intensified our efforts in various intervention programs towards mangrove restoration. Nigeria is working in close collaboration with the private sector, civil society organizations and NGOs on initiatives aimed at biodiversity and ecosystem restoration. One of such collaboration is the Finima Nature Park, a Ramsar site run by the Nigeria Liquefied Natural Gas Company and the Nigerian Conservation Foundation. The Finima Nature Park is a biodiversity haven in the wetlands of River State of Nigeria. The role of oceans and coastal marine ecosystems in mitigating climate change is often overlooked. Protecting and restoring ocean habitats such as mangroves, whose carbon sequestration is 4 times higher than terrestrial forests, is key. It's not too late to act and envision solutions that will preserve nature for future generations. Let us ensure that protected areas, the cornerstones of biodiversity conservation, are expanded to cover 30% of the Earth's land and sea by 2030. We must act now, we must act swiftly, and we must act boldly to reverse the loss of nature and adhere strongly to the One Health approach. One world, one health.
To kick off the closing session, I'm pleased to invite Executive Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity, Mrs. Elizabeth Mrema, to hear her reflections on the importance of the 30 by 30 target for the post-2020 framework. Mrs. Mrema, the floor is yours.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. It is my privilege to address this leaders-led gathering. First, I thank the government of France and the co-chairs governments of Costa Rica and UK for this opportunity. And at the onset, permit me to extend my warmest wishes for the wonderful 2021, hoping that this year will be better than last year. The world is reeling under severe biodiversity crisis, and this has been underlined this morning at the One Planet Summit. The 5th Global Biodiversity Outlook report shows clearly that the Earth's ecosystem are significantly being altered. The COVID-19 pandemic has reaffirmed what we already knew, that biodiversity is fundamental for the well-being of our planet and has given a new urgency to the need to protect it. Our Convention on Biological Diversity parties have long recognized that protected and conserved areas constitute important stocks of natural, cultural, and social capital, yielding flows of economically valuable goods and services that benefit human populations. It is also recognized that these areas deliver various benefits when they are effectively managed and governed with inclusiveness, transparency, and equity measures, with the participation of indigenous peoples and local communities, youth, among others. Despite the challenges of COVID-19, at the 75th anniversary of the United Nations General Assembly, there was a silver lining. Almost 20 million square kilometers of protected and conserved areas were added on land and seas over a decade, commemorating this event in a befitting manner. I'm pleased to actually report that we are on track to fully meet at least 17% of terrestrial element of Aichi biodiversity target 11 on protected areas and other effective area-based conserved measures, awaiting to be confirmed by the Protected Planet report in the coming month. In fact, we have already reached, or globally, 16.21%, with a gap of only 0.79% currently. We are also likely to soon cross the 10% threshold of marine protected areas, now reaching 7.71%, with a gap of barely 2.29%. Thereby also will be able to achieve the first of the 169 targets under the Sustainable Development Goals. This turning point and determination to promote green recovery with more ambitious conservation targets for the post-20 decade. In addition, major progress has been made in the increase in quantitative elements, which will improve 4 qualitative elements: coverage of ecological regions, coverage of important areas for biodiversity, coverage of important areas for carbon and water ecosystem services, and spatial connectivity by protected areas and other effective area-based conservation measures, thus updating the status of our global biodiversity report as launched in September last year. This also shows, with coherent and concerted efforts by all, globally agreed targets can actually be achieved. It also reiterates that protecting nature is of overriding importance, meriting bold and large-scale commitments and their implementation. We have certainly come far in the last decade. Much still remains to be done. The post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework will become our roadmap, and its implementation a necessity for the future we want. Urgent efforts are therefore required. The next 10 years will be most critical of our generation, and the just ended One Planet Summit has further underlined this fact. To this end, the coalition work is very timely, and I extend my appreciation and gratitude to all governments for sharing their commitments and implementation strategies in support of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. I trust that the coalition will provide the necessary impetus to translate its determination into on-the-ground reality with renewed hope, partnership, and confidence to conserve and restore biodiversity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Executive Secretary, for your words and for your tireless efforts driving forward the post-2020 framework. Now I have the honor to introduce our last guest, Mr. Carlos Manuel Rodriguez, CEO and Chairperson of the Global Environment Facility, who has been a key supporter of the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People. Carlos, Mr. Rodriguez, my friend, the floor is yours.
Now?
You may start.
Distinguished Excellencies, dear colleagues, dear friends, Ms. Robinson, my dear co-chairs, Minister Mesa and Goldsmith, greetings from a very rainy rainforest in Costa Rica. As the CEO of the GEF, I'm extremely delighted to be able to participate in the launch of the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People. And I want to congratulate from the deepest part of my heart all ministers and governments who has been able to commit to this high ambition goal. This year is going to be a very important year for many obvious reasons. We may see the beginning of the end of the pandemic. We may see some economic and social restoration at the same time that every single multilateral environmental agreement will have their meeting of the parties. But also for us at the GEF family, it is a very important year as well, because we will celebrate our 30th anniversary. During the last 30 years, the GEF has been working on ocean and terrestrial conservation. We have worked on species conservation, on creating protected areas, on biological corridors, but as well in the interface of many important areas, the interface of nature conservation and climate change, particularly in climate adaptation, the interface of food productions, climate change, and water provision. In this context, the goals and the ambitions set in these coalitions are extremely important, extremely relevant, and the GEF is preparing for the green-blue recovery in the aftermath of COVID-19. We have our eyes in the next replenishment process on how we will be supporting the countries in implementing their biodiversity goals and targets, as well as the other multilateral environmental agreements. So we congratulate the coalition. We commit ourselves at the financial mechanisms of the convention to support countries, improving their policy coherence in supporting the countries, in mobilizing financial resources from all sources, so we can be able to achieve all these very important international environmental agreements. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carlos, for your remarks. Your support has been crucial, and it will continue to be key as the world works to finance a global deal for biodiversity. Before asking the co-chairs of the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People to close the event, I'd like to reiterate that the world is at a turning point. As we've heard today, scientists tell us that we have a window of 10 years to solve the climate crisis and to reverse the severe trend of biodiversity loss. The choices we make this year will determine our path. It's time for a paradigm change, for increased ambition and urgent action. Today, more than ever, we need to work to strengthen multilateralism. I hope that all nations around the world will join forces with the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People and implement bold and necessary policies that will get us one step closer to the healthy, stable, and prosperous world foreseen in the Paris Agreement, the post-2020 biodiversity framework, and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Thank you all very much for joining today. It was a great pleasure to take part in this important event. With this, I give the floor to the co-chairs to give short closing remarks. Minister Meza, Secretary Abba, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all very much for your presence, for sharing your vision and your insight, and for your support to the High Ambition Coalition. I would like to thank particularly Minister Meza and Minister Goldsmith for their dedicated political support. It's an honor to be co-chairing the coalition with you. Thanks a lot. And we'd also like to thank you all for your continuous support at all levels. I'm confident that we will maintain this momentum in 2021. We are now 53 countries and we must continue our efforts to mobilize further. We have a collective responsibility to provide the necessary response to the interconnected crisis that we face, and increasing biodiversity protection has proven to be one of the most adequate solutions. We should all work to get more countries on board, so in order to ensure the successful adoption of our target. And each one of us has to go work in its region. Work should continue on the substance too, especially on the level of protection we are aiming at and the strategy of implementation. This year will be critical for biodiversity, and I'm looking forward to meet you again, at least at the IUCN World Congress that we will host in Marseille, and then in Kunming, China. Thank you all.
Thank you all, and thank you to all the participants. Thank you, Secretary of State, for being this great co-chair, and thank you to all the participants. We have been receiving and hearing a lot of commitments. It has been so inspired, and thank you also to Lord Goldsmith and to Mary Robinson. So just with this, thank you, and see you, hopefully see you in person sometime in this year. Thank you all.